correct, Jack?
Hey, that's right, guys. The House is looking into whether it should draw up articles of impeachment against President Trump. Let's discuss the big events first, and then let's break down what it could mean in the months ahead. So the central accusation here is that the president threatened to withhold congressionally approved military funds, taxpayer dollars, in exchange for what basically amounts to a political favor. At the end of last week, the transcript of the late July call was released by the White House. Now, we can confirm from the call's transcript that the president did attempt to get Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden. Also released was the whistleblower's complaint itself, which accused the White House of trying to restrict access to the call's records. President Trump is denying any wrongdoing and is accusing the Democrats of manufacturing the problem. Now let's pivot toward impeachment itself and what we could see going forward here. Here's how impeachment works. It's political. It's not necessarily legal. The articles are drawn up in the House and then need to pass the House. That's the first hurdle. So if this goes to the Senate for a trial, there will need to be a 2/3 majority, meaning that if we accept that all the Democrats, 45, and 2 independents, that makes 47, actually vote to remove Trump from office, we would need 20 votes from Republicans. We would need to sway 20 Republicans to remove President Trump from office, which is why many Democrats are worried that an impeachment would hand Trump an acquittal and a free campaign talking point against what he considers to be the corrupt Democratic establishment. But hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. That's what had happened if the House voted to impeach, and that was successful. We are still waiting on the testimony of the whistleblower, which is going to be huge, and it's coming pretty soon, guys.
Jack, let's tie this back to Central New York now. How are our local politicians reacting to all of these breaking developments?
Yeah, Sabrina, here in Central New York, John Katko last week actually came out against the impeachment process. Anthony Brindisi to the east of us in that district also came out against impeachment. He's a Democrat, which is really telling to, I guess, the infancy of this impeachment process right now. They say, let's wait for the facts to come out. And among those facts is that whistleblower testimony, which, like I said, it's going to be massive. It's going to lay the groundwork for what specifically the House can draw up articles of impeachment on.
Now, you mentioned they're still not hitting the numbers that they need to hit in the House, and of course, even if it makes it past then, we have a Republican-controlled Senate. How successful would an impeachment actually be?
Now, that's the question of the day, isn't it? Because the fact that so many Republicans in the Senate, well, I mean, there are 53 Republicans as it stands right now in the Senate. You need a supermajority to impeach. So the fact that there are so many factors working against the Democrats, if they move into the later stages of impeachment, is really what's going to I guess, offset some of the positives for them.
And looking ahead to where this investigation is going to go, what do you think Nancy Pelosi is going to be pursuing, and how big do you think the scope of this investigation is going to get?
Yeah, Sabrina, we had that breaking news today about the Mueller report developments, but I think she's going to stay away from that. The Mueller report is a 500-page document in legalese. It is very difficult for a large audience of people to understand, and very difficult for politicians to square with their constituents, explaining to them exactly what it's going to be about. If we get an impeachment inquiry, or a successful articles of impeachment, I should say, out of the House, it's probably going to center mostly around the Ukraine allegations. And speaking of which, earlier today, I sat down with SU professor of political science, Chris Faricy. He told Talking Points about how he thinks this is all going to play out. We're very grateful to have in our CitrusTV studio Professor Chris Faricy. He is a professor of political science in the Maxwell School of Citizenship. Chris, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start off by talking about, I guess, the political implications of this impeachment. We already know how starkly divided the Congress is right now. What do you see being, I guess, moving forward, the political fallout of this?
So the initial aspect is that impeachment's a political process and not a legal process. Why all of a sudden in the past couple weeks did the dam break and Speaker Pelosi in a sense kind of change her mind about instigating an impeachment inquiry? And the answer is that the politics became easier for Speaker Pelosi and for the moderate Democratic members in the House. The majority of Democratic members in the House are from moderate districts or swing districts. And Russia in the Mueller investigation was a more difficult sell. So it was a straightforward story that Nancy Pelosi and moderate members could communicate to the voters back home about why this was bad. and it allows them to move on this in a way they weren't able to with the Mueller report in Russia.
That sort of brings up another question for me. Do you think this is going to be an easier sell to Republicans in the House, and if this moves to a trial in the Senate, to Senate Republicans?
No, at this point it's not. On issues like this, partisan voters will follow the signals of partisan elites.
What do you think a successful impeachment, maybe not necessarily a successful impeachment, but an impeachment that moves to the Senate, what impact do you think that'll have on who gets chosen as the nominee?
I mean, if this whole thing gets wrapped up in the Senate votes, either guilty or not guilty in January or February, it'll be a memory by the time the campaign season for 2020 kicks into gear, right? But for the Democratic primary, it has the potential to upend the race. Joe Biden's biggest selling point was his electability. If there are Democratic voters who like Biden's policies, like Warren or Sanders or Kamala Harris's policies, but found Biden more electable, they may become worried about the accusations the president is throwing at the vice president regarding his son, and that might change their thinking about how electable the former vice president is.
What do you see happening in the next couple months?
They're going to call the whistleblower, so that'll be maybe one of the first chips to fall, is that the whistleblower whose report started this process is going to give testimony to the House Intelligence Committee. Speaker Pelosi has said that the other 6 House committees, which had already been doing investigations into other charges, there's been Trump's tax returns about whether there's a conflict of interest with his businesses. There's been charges of abuse of the emoluments clause. So the question becomes, does the House focus strictly on the Ukraine and the whistleblower report, or do they use the impeachment process to look at everything?
Professor Faricy, thanks so much for being with me today.
Thank you.